Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm Natalie, and this is Scientology Life After a Cult. And today we have a lot to talk about. Responses to Mike Rinder's recent videos and health condition have been popping up. Let's talk about it. Smith-Levin and Jenna Miscavige talk about Jenna's family dynamic and the inspiration for her book. We're going to talk about a video that they did. Nicole Kidman is setting the record straight about a particular picture and meme that's really been popular online, and there's a whole story behind it. And Mark Bunker, Wise Beard Man, shares wise words. That and so much more for us to talk about today. Welcome to everybody in the chat. Thank you. Thank you to the moderators for being here. And of course, big thank you to all of the channel members who support the channel here. Thank you for being here. Today, we are doing a members only live stream at 4 p.m., right? It's Tuesday, 4 p.m. Yes, that sounds right. And hopefully you guys can make it. Otherwise, catch it on the replay if you're a member. All right, everybody, let's talk about, we're going to get to the conversation, some response videos about Mike Rinder. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, we got to talk about this Nicole Kidman meme and what she's saying about it. If you guys remember, I don't know if you remember, you may have seen it. I'm going to show it to you. There is an image that was said to be Nicole Kidman coming out after her divorce from Tom Cruise. And she was like, oh, yes, freedom. I mean, it became like this symbol in a way. But my friends, there is a story behind it. Let's take a look at what page 6 has to say about it. But I want you to pay attention to some of the words being used that Nicole Kidman actually says. I feel like, because remember, Nicole Kidman is a former Scientologist. She did up through Operating Thetan Level 2 on Scientology's Bridge to Total Freedom. She did. That is getting pretty darn far in the world of Scientology. So what she says, sometimes I feel like I hear it as a former Scientologist, but you be the judge. You be the judge. Let's look at this clip from page 6 and let's discuss.
Nicole Kidman is setting the record straight on the viral 2001 photo of her seemingly celebrating her divorce from Tom Cruise. In an interview with GQ, she revealed that moment was in fact not true, saying, quote, "That was not me. That was from a film. That wasn't real life. I know that image." The meme notably made headlines in September of this year when Jenna Dewan posted it on Instagram after she and ex-husband Channing Tatum settled their divorce. In the profile, she also detailed the moment she woke up crying and gasping for air after hitting her mid-50s. She says that she is feeling everything all the more now when it comes to thoughts about her own humanity, saying, quote, "Morality, connection, life coming and hitting you, and loss of parents and raising children and marriage and all of the things that go into making you a fully sentient human. I'm in all of those places. Life is definitely a journey." Nicole shares daughters Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret with her husband, Keith Urban.
You know, the part talking about feeling everything, how she's just feeling things now, that resonates with me from the perspective of being a former Scientologist, because so much in Scientology was about controlling our emotions, but not in a healthy way. This is a really interesting thing about, well, I can only speak as a former Scientologist. So within Scientology is this idea of suppressing your emotions. You're not actually regulating your emotions. There's such a difference. And I've come to learn that in my almost 15 years out of this human trafficking called Scientology, after 35 years in it with 3 generations of my family. It's such an interesting concept to me, how that's processed, even when we're in Scientology after we leave, and then even years after we leave. And we're going to talk more about that, because there's a clip I'm going to share that kind of gets into that. But it's an interesting topic to me, of the difference between self-regulation versus suppressing and compartmentalizing and not dealing with emotions. They're different. Because I also don't believe that it's true to, to express those emotions in a way that's harmful to somebody else. It just gets into this whole, it could, you know what, I feel a future video coming on about this, of expressing your upset, versus regulating your emotions versus not covering it up as we were told to do in Scientology. It's a whole rabbit hole. I'm doing a bit of research on this, and I think I'm going to be doing a video about it soon. So if you guys have thoughts on this, jump into those comments and tell me. And if you're on the replay, jump in there as well. So I think the whole Nicole Kidman thing is interesting. And that meme that became very popular, in fact, who just divorced, what's his name? Really handsome actor. Was it Tatum something or other? I should really have this straight. Anyway, she shared it after her divorce. And now come to find out that was from a movie. It wasn't actually when Nicole Kidman left the courthouse. And honestly, like, that makes sense to me. Channing Tatum. Thank you, Nancy. Channing Tatum was the one who got a divorce, and his ex-wife shared that Nicole Kidman, what has become a meme. So I find that interesting. And I believe it because if you look at the image, let's see, did they show it on this thing? They did. Hold on. I'm going to pull it back up for you guys. What's interesting to me about it is she doesn't look like she's dressed for court. I mean, or even if you're going to your attorney's office, I don't know. I'm believing what she's saying, that actually was not related to that. Nicole Kidman is saying it came from a movie. Also, though, I saw another video that said she's shared different answers for what that was really about. So now I'm a little on the fence about it, but I found it interesting nonetheless. What also I found very interesting, as did many of you who sent this to me, Rainn Wilson has a show. It's called Backstrom Investigates. And it's on television. And in an episode, hold on, I'm going to pull up this article so I can just share it with you guys. In an episode, Backstrom investigates a murder in a Scientology-like cult in the latest episode of the Rainn Wilson Detective Vehicle. So this is interesting. I love it when Scientology crosses over into popular culture and films, even if they're not calling it Scientology in the show. We know, people know. So let's get to that part. All right. So let's see. They talk about the show. The great Pat Healy plays the creepy head of the Church of Edification, a waxy monster of banality who is sleeping with the victim. Healy's casting as a higher up at a cult in the unmistakable mold of L. Ron Hubbard's bastard brainchild promises more than it delivers. It's inspired casting, but not a role that gives Healy much to work with. Making a church the episode's backdrop allows the show to make the excellent point that religion is dumb and people of faith are stupid and it's just a bunch of hypocrisy, lies, and BS. Now, I don't agree with that statement. I'm just reading what's in the article. So it's interesting. I love when that happens, when there's that crossover and when people recognize it and go, ooh, that sounds like Scientology. That sounds just like Scientology. Kind of like that, what do you call that game? Oh my gosh, I swear I got the menopause brain fog today. The driving game that the kids play where there's a Scientology center under a different name in it. Nancy, you're going to have to help me out again. The menopause brain is strong today. But it pops up. It just pops up and you never know when it's going to pop up. And I love it so much. Speaking of popping up, Josh Brolin, the actor, the stepson of Barbra Streisand, right? Isn't that right? Josh Brolin saw John Travolta use Scientology techniques on Marlon Brando in Barbra Streisand's living room. So he put out a memoir recently, and the Goonies actor released his memoir, From Under the Truck, on November 19th. So it's out today. And there's an interesting tidbit in the memoir where he shares a story about how John Travolta gave a touch assist to Marlon Brando. And it was at, oh, thank you, Remarts, Grand Theft Auto. Yes, it was just on the tip of the tongue. That's right. Nolo, thank you. Grand Theft Auto 5. It's called Epicilianism. That's right. That is right. Thank you guys so much. God, I love having a live chat. I really do. Okay, so back to this thing here. John Travolta at Barbra Streisand's house. I mean, can you imagine it? Marlon Brando, John Travolta. This was back in the day. And he says, I'd been invited to a dinner with John Travolta, Kelly, his gorgeous and uber pleasant wife, Marlon Brando, a redhead Marlon had met on the internet, my pops, and his wife, Barbara, a singer, Brolin wrote. I was 27 years old, and the whole reason I got into acting was because of the early films I had watched starring Marlon and the late James Dean, who incidentally died from an automobile accident on the outskirts of my hometown of Paso Robles, and ended up in the same morgue that my mother would just months before the 40th anniversary of his death. So he's got some connections there. So I get that. So this must have been an even more interesting experience for him. So basically, what he says, he was excited that he was going to meet Marlon Brando. And let's get to the John Travolta part. Okay, Brolin said it was at that point he heard Travolta, a long time and well-known Scientologist, say, I just got to the next level. Marlon sauntered up to John and John to Marlon, and they gave each other an ebullient hug. What a weird word to use. One, I don't know what it is. But second, it's just like, seems like an odd, like, effusive, like what does that even mean? And couldn't you have described it in a simpler way? But okay. John excitedly told Marlon how he had just completed a Scientology course on healing and that he could help him. John grabbed Marlon softly by the hand and led him inside toward Barbara's living room. By the time I walked in, remember this is James Brolin, Josh Brolin talking. Marlon was prostrate on a chaise lounge, and John told him to close his eyes. He continued, I stood there quietly and left mine open. John put his hand on Marlon's leg, then his hand on Marlon's chest. Time passed quietly. Nobody spoke. I was the person furthest away from them. I watched Marlon Brando and Danny Zuko. This is insane. Now, it sounds like he was giving him a touch assist. So I don't know if in the recanting of the story, he doesn't actually remember. It's feel my finger, thank you. Feel my finger, thank you. You go up and down the body on opposite sides. This is such an interesting story to me because just to be a fly on the wall while John Travolta gives a touch assist to Marlon Brando and Josh Brolin watches. I mean, it just sounds crazy. And it was many years ago, but interesting nonetheless. And interesting how it made it into his book too. And I think it is a really interesting anecdote. And Nancy's word clearing for us. Meaning of ebullient in English, very energetic, positive, and happy. He wasn't his usual ebullient self. Ooh, thank you, Nancy. That makes sense now. It really does. All right. Jen Sell, I don't want to feel anyone's finger. Yeah, it's feel my finger. Thank you. Feel my finger. Thank you. Interesting story. And it's I think about too John Stamos when his memoir came out. It was a big part of the story. What really hit the news everywhere and got repeated was the fact that he was kicked out of Scientology, that Scientology didn't want a young John Stamos. And they booted him out because he was being silly, making fun of the e-meter and stuff like that, which I'm like, okay, I bet Scientology's regretting that one, kicking a young John Stamos out of there. They could have had another celebrity. I wonder sometimes if Scientology, and I guess, Scientology as a whole can't have regret, but individuals like David Miscavige, like, do they regret that? Do they regret allowing me onto the confidential operating Thetan levels? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. They were probably right. They had second thoughts about allowing me on. Like, I really had to work at it, prove myself more than just pay for it. And I guess I don't blame them in the end because look at me. Here I am now on the internet, daily exposing Scientology as the human trafficking cult that it is. All right. So now let's talk about, oh my gosh, you guys, I saw this. A bunch of you saw this. So it's 40 random bits of pop culture trivia that the cat dragged in. So keep in mind there's 40 random bits, but here's the interesting thing. There's all this random stuff like the Terminator filmed without a permit and poisoned the crew. Ooh, 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 ooh. I cannot look at Linda Blair in The Exorcist. Ugh. I meant to scroll fast past that. Terrorized me as a child and still to this day. I don't even want to look at the image. Here's the interesting thing. As I scroll down and give everybody vertigo, including myself. Here, okay. Look how many are about Tom Cruise and Scientology, right? Tom Cruise sued Bauer Media for claiming he chose Scientology over his daughter. Bauer Media, In Touch Weekly, and Life and Style reported that Cruise abandoned Surrey for Scientology and he sued them for $50 million. They reached a confidential settlement. That's interesting because I don't know, doesn't it look that way that Tom Cruise did choose Scientology over his daughter? Call me crazy, but we don't really see them together and it looks like disconnection. It quacks like disconnection. It smells like disconnection. It looks like disconnection. I think it's just disconnection. But anyways, that was interesting that made the cut. And then this one, Shelley Miscavige, of course, things that mysteriously disappeared, the wife of the Scientology boss. David Miscavige's sketchiness extends to the whereabouts of his wife, Shelley, who was last seen in public in August of freaking 2007. The LAPD followed a 2013 missing person report by saying she's actually super alive, you guys. So interesting. And then another one, South Park. This is like 3 of them. I think there's 4, but this is the 3rd one about Isaac Hayes quitting over South Park lambasting Scientology and sharing the whole thing about Xenu. Okay, so 4 on this list of 40 are about Scientology. The Church of Scientology has a compound in California called Gold Base. It's guarded by snipers and armed gate guards and houses a prison that practices torture and a paramilitary training school. That's an interesting way of putting it. Oh, I'm wrong. There's 5. 5 of the list of 40 are about Tom Cruise or Scientology. Germany wouldn't let Tom Cruise film a movie at their military sites because he is a member of Scientology. Now, Scientology is viewed as a dangerous cult by the German authorities. Well, they're getting that right. Oh, nope, 6. Tom Cruise riffs an entire New Testament. A top secret Scientology video was unearthed. So again, that was a huge pop culture. Nope, there's another one. Scientology has reportedly ruined Nicole Kidman's relationship with her oldest children. I mean, it goes on and on. There's so many more. There's more again and again and again. Katie Holmes, Kirstie Alley, all of these pop culture moments. And then they go on to other ones. But you see why I think this is so interesting, because so many of them, there's like 8, I lost track, are about Scientology or a Scientologist. And these are these major pop culture moments. And I think it says a lot about the draw that people have to celebrities. And one of the reasons I talk about it, one, I'd like to throw shade at Tom Cruise because I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I really do. He took advantage of free labor, Scientology Sea Org members who dedicated a billion years, lifetime after lifetime, not to, clean his house and redo his airport hangar or his vehicles or any of that. So, but I love that. I think it's so interesting. It really is such a part of pulp culture. Any celebrity tied to Scientology brings with them the story and truth about Scientology. Not that they're going to say it necessarily, but other people will, and it will follow. And that is often people's first introduction into Scientology. And that is a human trafficking cult, even when being presented in a positive way by a celebrity. Because the comment, the recaps, all of the things across different social media platforms cover it. So that is why we talk a lot here on my channel about celebrities and Scientology, because it is a big thing that people pay attention to. All right, now let's take a look at a video that Aaron Smith-Levin at Growing Up in Scientology and Jenna Miscavige did yesterday. And it was hilarious because if you watch the video in the beginning, Jenna can't stop laughing, which was funny. And then Jenna was talking and Aaron was struggling not to laugh. But there are so many excellent parts after that. One, I thought the beginning was adorable and hilarious. But Jenna gets into sharing the inspiration for her book and why she did it when she did it. And you got to remember, and if you don't know, Jenna Miscavige has been exposing Scientology and talking about it longer than pretty much most of us here on YouTube. I'd have to actually go back and look at the years, except for maybe like Mark Bunker was a bit before that. But Jenna Miscavige was speaking out about Scientology before even, Mark Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder and other people came out and did that whole series with the Tampa Bay Times in 2012, which resulted in so many Scientologists leaving. And if not leaving, becoming under the radar Scientologists, which is pretty much when you want to leave Scientology, but you got to play along because you got kids in the Sea Org or some stuff like that. So her book was written 5 or so years after she had been already exposing Scientology and was away from Scientology. So anyways, I'm telling the whole story here. Let's just hear it from Jenna herself in this clip.
Scientology put out this statement that was like, this is not true. We love families. Like, family is the most important thing.
And this is the question was, what inspired her book? What inspired her to write the book, which it came out in like 2013.
We don't have that. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, they're such liars that I can't even take it. I was like, I can't let this go. Like, this is like I was like, they're disgusting and they think they can get away with anything. That's the main thing. I was like, they're not just horrible, but they're so arrogant that they think that they can get away with anything. And so I was like, that's it. I'm telling the truth. Like, and I wrote this letter to like a lady in the Office of Special Affairs, which is like sort of the branch of Scientology that does their PR and puts out all their BS lies.
Who was it?
It was Karen Powell.
Okay.
And so I wrote this letter to her, and
and you guys may have heard Karen Powell's name repeatedly in different press and media. I'm not even sure today if she's actually still on that job or if Scientology is just using her name to, you know what I'm saying, to put out press releases and other statements.
Been like, if it's true that Scientology loves families so much, then why can't I talk to my grandfather? I was like, sort of like trying to challenge them, like.
Excellent. You guys really got to go see this. I'm linking everything down below after this video because she shares that part so well. And that whole story of what actually inspired her to write this book and how Beyond Belief, Jenna Miscavige's book, is her full story. And she felt that Scientology was putting out false information, which they were, that, oh no, we believe in family, we support families. And I love that she made that point and she took it straight to Scientology, like, well, you're saying this, but wait a minute, why can't I talk to my grandfather? And so on and so on and so on. Just a really interesting, I love the inspiration there. So check it out. And if you guys have not read Jenna Miscavige's book, Beyond Belief, you got to read it or check it out on Audible. It's on Audible as well. And the young lady who narrates the book sounds like a young Jenna Miscavige, which is kind of cool while you're reading it. But do check it out. There's so much information in there. Cubana Chica, yes, Scientology always manages to shoot themselves in their own foot. Yep. That's why I like to say, I don't even consider myself to be in a battle with Scientology. I don't battle Scientology. I'm just over here exposing it, just pointing, going, hey, y'all see this? I saw it. Many of us former members saw it, and we can share with you our experience, but look at what's happening over here. Same thing with people live streaming and protesting Scientology. Just point your camera. They will do it themselves. Oh, they will. They really will. Very much so. Okay, so let's take a look now at, I want to share something with you guys before I forget. I've got a premiere video coming up today at, when is it coming up? I think it's 12 p.m. Central Time. Yes, 12 p.m. Central Time. Cults to Cookies, Life After a Cult. So I was inspired recently, many times actually, by speaking of Jenna Miscavige. Jenna's been doing a lot of videos, sharing cooking tips and all kinds of stuff. And she also shares stories about her time in Scientology and the nostalgia of some of the things she makes or does creatively, even when it comes to arranging flowers. So, anyways, you'll have to see the premiere. I got a hair up my butt and I'm like, you know what? I think I need to learn how to make some cookies. I am not good in the kitchen. And yeah, it's an understatement. And the video is kind of a hot mess, but you guys should check it out. Hopefully you can check it out with me. There's going to be the premiere. The premiere will be 12 p.m. Central today. And you can always catch it later as well. But I had fun making it. But oh boy, did it open my eyes to what I don't know even about my own kitchen. So I'm trying. Your girl is trying. I'm trying to show up and, make food. That was a good start for me. It was. I don't know why. Well, I know why I'm having a hard time with it, but I think we all know why I'm having a hard time with it, but we won't get into that right now. What we are going to get into is Dan Walks LA. Dan Walks LA is a live streamer and protester of Scientology in Hollywood, and he was out front the Hollywood Testing Center again with his television set up, spreading the word. Listen to this.
Scientology has described psychiatry as an industry of death. Why is that?
Well, I think that's a catchphrase, but what Scientology has worked hard against are abusive practices of psychiatry, not psychiatry in general.
Now, did you hear that statement? This was from an earlier news show that Scientology is about against specific abuses of psychiatry, not psychiatry itself. That is the biggest bunch of BS of all the things that Scientology says. That is one of the biggest lies that I've ever heard. Because hello, you have an exhibit called Psychiatry, an Industry of Death. You literally blame psychiatry for the Holocaust. Scientology believes and dictates and indoctrinates its members to believe that psychiatrists existed on the whole track. So that means last lifetime, 1,000,000 years ago, 1,000,000 lifetimes, however long ago, when people were flying around in spaceships, that psychiatry brought about that demise as well. Like it's like blame psychiatry. Everything is psychiatry's fault. And they stick to that. And so actually, you know what? Let me finish the clip because even she gets called out on this.
You say not psychiatry in general, but an industry of death. Well, sounds pretty general.
Well, because unfortunately, there have been a lot of abuses, and psychiatry has caused a lot of deaths.
Therapist Rachel Bernstein says those are scare tactics, and she says she sees.
Remember, Dan's sitting in front of the Hollywood Testing Center, where it's, supposed to be one of Scientology and LA's biggest recruitment areas. But as we know, the doors are closed. There's still stuff going on behind the scenes, but they aren't out front handing out propaganda anymore.
The impact on former Scientologists she treats.
They've been made to feel so scared of therapists in general because they've been told that they're going to be locked in and I'm going to put electrodes on their heads, and it's keeping the blame on the victim.
Very, very, very true. And I was thinking about that. Scientology is so over the top about not getting any valid form of mental health treatment, right? So it makes sense to me now as a former Scientologist that no wonder they wouldn't want us to seek any valid form of mental health therapy because one, we would awaken to the fact that our autonomy, our decision-making for ourselves, separating ourselves out from the collective, especially in the C organization, is not something they want us doing. And if we maintain that Scientology viewpoint that anything that happened to us during our time in Scientology that may have been abusive is our fault, that maintains until you learn something different. You learn other tools. And in my opinion, stopping Scientologists from seeking mental health treatment is one of the more damaging practices in Scientology. And all you have to do is look at the history of Scientology. Lisa McPherson, Whitney Mills, countless others who unalived or harmed themselves because they did not get valid, actual, helpful mental health therapy. It wasn't even acknowledged. Instead, the blame was put on them, the victim, or on their body thetans and reactive mind. And they just need to do more Scientology. You just need to do more Scientology. So that is an interesting part of that I'm glad that Dan Walks LA is sharing that right outside of Scientology. So again, I'll link his video down below too, so you can check it out. James Steele, thank you for being a member for 8 months of the channel. Doesn't time fly when your life's a pun? You can always catch James Steele in the comments, dropping some really fun dad jokes on occasion. All right, let's see here. Where am I? Okay. Let's see. Hey, Dusty, welcome. I am just getting caught up here. Okay. let's talk about some responses to Mike Rinder's recent videos. You guys know that I talked about it. Maybe it's been a week now, and I've been doing a lot of processing. I'm still processing. And I think that's the thing, is many of us are processing, and we're trying to process. Here is a man who has done a lot to expose Scientology. That is undeniable. Quite a bit. We're going to take a look at a couple clips from recent responses to his video to kind of wrap our heads around what and how people are processing that, versus then for some a desire for what some characterize as justice, for a desire of wanting him to do more to expose what happened in his personal involvement, specifically in covering up SA in the Sea Organization and in Scientology. And I think it's really interesting how everybody is processing this in different ways, and myself included. I'm still processing it. I'm still working through it. And I have some thoughts on it that I want to share. But first, I wanted to take a look at a clip from a video from Liz Gale. And Liz Gale did a video, and she was very open about how she too is still processing, and she's not sure how to feel. She's not sure what stance to take on this when it comes to Mike Rinder. Let's take a look at a clip from a video that Liz did.
Then we have Mike Rinder. And I haven't decided if I don't know what to do with my relationship with Mike Rinder, to be honest with you guys. But at this point, what he stands for and the reality of what he is a man at the end of his life who doesn't want to go yet. His family doesn't want him to go. Nobody really wants him to go. And the closure's not happening. I guess I'll put it like that. The closure for Miriam's not happening. The closure for some of us out here is not happening. And we can demand it, right? We can demand closure, demand healing from. The reality is a lot of these high X-ranking Scientologists are of an older generation. They're in a different phase of their lives. We can demand all day long that they give us what we need, that they, admit what they've done, that they come to terms, that they turn themselves over to the police, that they do all these different things. But none of what we want them to do, is real. It's not enforceable, right?
And this is kind of, I think, a key point in this is she's right. A lot of it is not enforceable, and different people have specific needs or expectations, desires to have closure, which they should have, especially victims of childhood SA in Scientology, or SA in Scientology that was covered up by the Office of Special Affairs, and then, by Mike Rinder, who was over it for so many years. There is that. But then there's Mike Rinder has done so much to expose Scientology. The show he did with Leah Remini, Scientology Aftermath, was the gateway, the opening for so many to have an interest in and learn about Scientology. I knew people, even friends of mine, that I had told a little bit about my experience in Scientology. And it was only when they saw Scientology Aftermath that they came back to me. At the time, I shared a few things with them, not even the craziest stuff, just a little bit. They were just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's crazy. But after they saw Scientology Aftermath, I had some friends come back and go, hey, oh my gosh, you were telling the truth. I'm like, you thought I was lying? And they're like, no, I didn't think you were lying, but it was hard to believe. It's hard to believe because it's difficult to believe that human beings could be so horrific to each other and treat each other that way, even in a cult. So that show gave a lot of validity and credibility to many of our stories, to so many stories that weren't even on the show. And the former Scientologists who came forward and did that was huge. They completely put a target on themselves from Scientology. Many of them went on to do YouTube channels and continue to expose Scientology. So that's true too. Mike Rinder did the Tampa Bay Times, a series of articles in exposing Scientology. He's gone to the FBI. All of these things are true, and they're all true at the same time. And so Liz brings up a great point of, how do you enforce something like that? You can't force somebody to give you closure. Can you get closure on your own? I don't know. These are many of the questions and what she kind of gets into.
Right? And so it's just like watching this. I feel like I'm watching this show that just keeps going and there's never any closure. And it's sad and it's exhausting. And I feel like I could step in and say, Mike Rinder, why did you spend all this time making these videos about XYZ when it could have been about whatever, ABC? But I'm not the one on my deathbed. Like, I'm not the one who has to live Mike Rinder.
That's such a great point. And I'll link Liz's video down below. And that is another point of view of looking at this. And Liz doesn't really have resolution yet on this. She's processing it in real time in her video. And the questions that she asks are really valid questions. Because again, it's interesting that you have different pieces of information that are all actually true. But how do you get resolution? If you're seeking closure, if you're wanting somebody else to say something or do something, but you can't force that person to do it, then is it a worthwhile endeavor to continue to pursue that? Or especially add in now that Mike Rinder is deathly ill and at the end of his life. So how long does it serve a point or a purpose to continue to hammer on you shoulda, coulda, woulda kind of a thing? That is the big question for many in this community. And I think there is a path to discuss it and continue to hear different points of views on it, to take all of it in. And that's what I want to take a look at. Let's take a look at a clip from Children of Scientology. This is Christy Gordon's channel. This is a few lessons from one ex-Scientologist to another.
The us against them, with us or against us crap, because it feels safe to stick with people who agree with us. And then sometimes we still act like our opinions or perspectives are the only right ones. A lot like in Scientology. Yikes. Maybe we could try to be more open to different ways of thinking. New ideas. We're all figuring out our beliefs and feelings now. And the sky's the limit. It's okay if we don't agree on everything, as long as we're not jerks about it. Let's not create new divisions or departments. We've been through enough of that. Also, clicks are for dorks. Number 4, listening, but we'd rather be talking.
So again, that is another interesting point of view, and it's true. In Scientology, on the Scientology organizing board, there are all these different divisions and departments. So I think it was kind of a pun there. And that's true. How far, how long, at what point? Is there anything Mike Rinder could even say or do at this point that would give the individuals who seek that closure? I don't know. And that's not something any of us are going to know. It's up to that one individual, what they want to do with it, how they want to respond. And I think using as much kindness as we can when we talk about something that's incredibly difficult to talk about. And because you believe one thing doesn't mean that the other thing is not true. Multiple things can be true at the same time, even if they don't seem to be in agreement with each other. Coming out of something like Scientology, a human trafficking cult, right? When you were in a position of power for so many years. And, let's not forget, Mike Rinder himself is a second generation Scientologist too. And then so many people after that, it's a generational thing too. And Liz Gale does talk about that in her video. And I get that. And I see that. It's each generation, I think, even take Scientology out of the equation. You can take almost any controversial topic in history, and each generation has a different point of view on it. And I would like to think, I look at my family and I like to think that each generation is doing better. Each generation will do better. My mom had a horrific upbringing, wasn't in Scientology, but it was horrific. I had an upbringing in Scientology, but even with that, it was better than what my mom experienced in ways. And same thing with my children. Even though my children were raised in Scientology, I did not raise my kids the way my mom raised me in Scientology. I had separated some things out, and I kind of wanted to keep my kids away from a lot of that. My children are not raising their children in Scientology at all. My grandchildren, the fourth generation, are the first generation never in Scientology in my family in 4 generations. That's pretty amazing. They're not going to grow up around it. They're not going to grow up with anything except maybe the after effects of our family dealing with a multi-generational experience in Scientology. Same with Liz Gale and many others. This involves multiple generations of our family. So it's going to take a minute, more than a hot minute to figure it out. And for people to get further in their healing of all of it, to process it and understand it. And it's going to be really messy at times, because it is messy. Because remember, we're talking about a human trafficking cult where people were involved in it for multiple generations of their family. So there's a lot there. So then I looked at a response from Jacob Harkey. Jacob Harkey is someone never in Scientology who has been protesting Scientology for some time. And Jacob Harkey shares how he got started in that. So this is the point of view from someone who's not been in Scientology, but who recently in the last few years learned about it. So let's take a look at what he says.
I really started paying attention in fall of 2020, which is when the TV show Leah Remini's Scientology and the Aftermath was put onto Netflix. Mike Rinder is a co-host of the show, so he appeared in every episode. And after starting to watch the show, it pretty quickly became one of my favorite shows. And it quickly got to the point where every time I would watch an episode, the next day I'd be thinking about that episode and I'd want to learn more about whatever it was I just learned about. So I started reading Tony Ortega's website, The Underground Bunker. I started reading Mike's blog. I read Blown for Good, Mark Headley's book, Mark Headley being another board member of the Aftermath Foundation and ex-Scientologist who has been speaking out for years. I started watching Aaron Smith-Levin's channel. I really started paying attention in fall.
So it's a way that he came to learn about this. And one show introduced him to other things and he learned more about it. Jacob Harkey has covered court cases in Los Angeles. And it's interesting to hear his point of view of somebody who doesn't have that history. And that's something to consider too, right? It's each person is going to feel differently about this and have a different point of view based on where they came from, based on their experiences. And there is never going to be a time where everybody is going to have complete agreement on what should be done, what Mike Rinder should do, what victims of Scientology should do, how it should be communicated. But I think what we're moving towards, or what I hope we're moving towards, is at least the understanding that this is super messy and it's painful and this involves the lives of very real people. And how can there's a path where we can still communicate about it and talk about it and even express an upset, even with Mike Rinder or somebody else, but you can do it in a way that's just not so hateful, and not just because Mike Rinder is dying. But that is a big part of it right now. And those are the points kind of that Liz Gale was bringing up, is does it change the situation? And I think that it does, because that's human nature. It's in a way that is good. Does it mean that he's a saint and everything is forgotten? No, it doesn't. Honestly, it doesn't have to mean anything, except I think the one thing we can agree on for most of us is, regardless of somebody's experience with Mike Rinder or the Office of Special Affairs or any of the people involved with it, there can still be compassion for somebody who is at the end stage of their life. And there can be conversations around it that still involve, hey, disagreements with what he did or he didn't do. I think it's all in the delivery of it and how you do it, because talking about it is part of the healing. Communicating about it is part of the healing. And there's going to be times where people are still going to be upset about it and are going to say things that other people don't like about it. But I think the fact that Liz Gale and others are at least stopping to look at this and evaluate it and think about it and try to understand it is really huge, because that's not something we would be allowed to do in Scientology. Scientology is very black and white. Scientology is black and white in the thinking. That's a cult mentality. You're with us or you're against us. It's them against us. If you don't agree with me, you're my enemy. You're either a friend or you're an enemy. That's just not the reality of the actual world. There are differences and nuances, and we change and we fluctuate on where we're at on things. And as we learn more information, or we come to an understanding, or we gain more tools, we might see certain things differently. But it's not all going to be solved now. It's not all going to be resolved now. And I think those conversations and looking within and asking ourselves, like, how do I feel about this? Because it's so conflicting. You want to have compassion, and you can, and we should. At the end of the day, I think that's the one thing we can agree on. So I think another I interviewed Mark Bunker yesterday. And I really enjoyed this interview. Mark Bunker is someone that's been exposing Scientology for a long time. And Mark Bunker had something to say about this. And I was surprised at how emotional, I'm getting emotional talking about how emotional Mark Bunker was, how emotional it was for him. And it made me think. And I'm going to play that clip because it was impactful for me. I'm surprised I kept it together while we were doing the interview. But I think it says a lot. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at that clip, and then we'll talk about this some more. And this is the interview I did with Mark Bunker yesterday.
During that period when everything fell apart with the Lisa McPherson civil case that Bob had been funding, and he had to take the witness stand and said truthfully on the stand, I can't take it anymore. I have to get out, because it was so brutal.
Yeah.
And then we were up in New Hampshire, and every day I would show up to work.
I'm muted. Bob Minton was funding the Lisa McPherson Trust, and he was also funding when Mark Bunker got arrested in Chicago while he was on a public street for trespassing. That court case took something like $60,000, and Bob Minton funded that. So he's talking about that time period. And Bob Minton had been through so much with Scientology. And at that point, he was trying, Mark Bunker talks about trying to keep the website going, but the impact this had on Bob Minton, who was not a Scientologist. So we'll listen to this some more.
Wondering if this was the day Bob would have blown his brains out, because it had gotten so desperate because friends were attacking him. So, and I see this now with Mike and with Aaron, and people take sides, and they're, I like them both. They're both important. They've both done great work. Yes. And I can understand the passion that people have, but it's not, you're not going to convince anyone to reveal more information by attacking them. And I've always felt, it's best to work with them and make progress. Anyway, I just wanted to say that Aaron is my friend, and from all the things that were said in recent videos, he now seems presidential. Uh, and Mike and Mark Headley and Claire Headley, those are terrific people. So I would like to see a ceasefire if possible. So if you want to still consider me wise beard man, and if everyone can tone it down a little bit, you can still make your points. But that would be a helpful thing to do.
Wise words from Wise Beard Man, as he was known in the anonymous days. And I think he makes an excellent point. And Mark Bunker is somebody that is friends with all of these different people, and he has his own experience with them. And Mark Bunker is someone who had experiences with Mike Rinder before Mike Rinder left Scientology. And Mark Bunker got to know Mike Rinder outside of that, after that. And I think what he's saying just makes so much sense that, hey, you can still have your opinion and your thoughts, and we're going to continue to talk about it, and people will. But we can also kind of put the pitchforks down, because you can communicate about a disagreement. We can share about it, and sometimes it's going to get heated. I'm going to get heated. Other people are going to get heated, right? But if we can make a conscious effort to at least try and just remind each other, like, okay, the goal we all share is to expose Scientology and its human rights abuses, and expose Scientology for the human trafficking cult that it is. All of this, at the end of the day, is a byproduct of Scientology and what happened within Scientology. And I thought about this, and I thought, for me, it comes down to, what do I value more? Do I value, the idea of closure or justice? Let's just say justice. Do I value justice over peace, or hoping somebody has peace? Like even Mike Rinder, and I think that's the thing for us. It comes down to, all as individuals, what do we value more? What's more important to you? And if you value justice more than your own personal peace or peace for other people, that's where you're at, and that is okay. And if you value, peace over justice in the specific situation, then that's okay too. But we're going to have people on different sides of that, and who are at different places. But I think what we don't need to do is draw a line in the sand and have black and white thinking of, you're on this side or you're on that side. This whole idea of sides is ridiculous and very cult mentality, and not limited to this community. This is a human nature issue, this taking sides. Scientology makes it extra culty and doubles down on it and indoctrinates heavily that you're with us, you're against it, that it's very black and white. But it tends to be kind of human nature in ways to think that way. But what if we didn't think that way? What if there were shades of it, which I think there are? And I think that's where the internal, when we're looking within about how we feel about something or where we stand on it, that's where that comes from, is we have multiple ideas at play. And then we have friends who feel one way and friends who feel another way. Okay. I think there's a path in a scenario where we can have friends who think differently from us. I know I do. And we can have friends who, friendship is a spectrum to a degree. You have different boundaries with different friends, depending on how close you are to them or not. You have acquaintances. You have people that you work with. These are different relationships. In Scientology, in the C organization, we were not allowed to see it that way. All we were allowed to see is one way. The Scientology way, the L. Ron Hubbard way, the way that Scientology felt would best serve Scientology. And that was the only way. And anyone who disagreed with that was shut down. They're a suppressive person. You're not allowed to think any other way. And I think that is the danger we run into when we start letting that type of black and white thinking enter again into our whole world here. And it's something that I try, and I have to put effort into. It doesn't come naturally to me either, to not think that way in so many ways since I've left Scientology, which will be 15 years in January. It's taken a long time. I didn't leave Scientology and was like, oh, okay, I'm good now. No, I'm still not good, but I'm good enough. You know, I'm at the point where I can evaluate information and I can separate out what was Scientology and what was me. I have more tools to be able to do that today, thanks to valid forms of mental health treatment that have nothing to do with Scientology. So why wouldn't we use some of those own tools? We can have compassion and understanding for somebody who is suffering. Mike Rinder is suffering. His family is suffering. His friends are suffering. It's a lot of suffering and pain. It's okay to have compassion for that. And it's okay to kind of want to put the pitchfork down and not go at the guy. And if you don't want to do that, I think we got to be okay with that too. We need to have that space. It's just, I guess, the thing I ask and what I think was wise, what Mark Bunker was saying is we can do it in a way that doesn't continue to feed this machine of hate and black and white thinking, and that you have to choose a side. You don't. You can love Mike Rinder and be in my chat, be a member of my channel. You can follow other YouTubers, other ones, so many other people. I don't care who you follow, what you do. All I ask is when you're here, that you try to be kind to each other. Doesn't mean we're not going to talk about things that are difficult or talk about things that we don't disagree with or talk about things that this friend agrees with, this friend doesn't agree with. We can do all of that. But I think if nothing else, Mike Rinder dying is kind of speeding up that whole thing, that whole process, because it's forcing many of us to look and go, okay, if I'm willing to give more grace, if I'm willing to put down the pitchfork, and putting down the pitchfork does not mean not still having your point of view of how you feel he should respond or what he should do. It's just not being so about it. It's in the delivery, like Mark Bunker was saying. There's ways that you can communicate that. And I feel personally that that's a healthier route for me. And I think for many, and it's going to be a continued conversation and it's going to be messy and people are going to be upset about it still. And I think we got to make room for that and be okay and also be willing to sit in that sometimes when somebody is upset and they're having a hard time and they're trying to process something and they're sharing it with us, that we make space for that. And even with our disagreements, like I still disagree with the videos that Mike Rinder did and the way that was done. I don't agree with that, but he gets to do that. That is his truth. That is his point of view. That is where he stands, and he gets to be in that space. Now, whether me or anyone else thinks that's not the way to go or that he should be or do or say something else, that doesn't matter at the end of the day, really. But if we can have compassion because he's at the end of his life, shouldn't we then have that compassion or level of understanding or willingness to not be so black and white about our thinking with any situation or other person, whether they're in the ex-Scientology community or not? When they're not dying, before they're dying, like I was saying, Mike Rinder dying, I think is speeding up this conversation of continuing to share your pain as a victim of Scientology and to seek that justice. I don't think that should stop. If a person feels drawn and called to do that, then they should. And if someone else doesn't, then they don't. Because this is going to go on long beyond when Mike Rinder is gone and no longer here. These same conversations, I don't think there's anything that he could do at this point that would just where everybody would be like, oh, okay, I feel good about this now. I'm not going to hate on him anymore. And I think that's the difference is we don't have to hate. We can still discuss. We can still disagree. We can disagree and not hate. And sometimes it's going to be hard to do that for individuals. And there's going to be more of that. But if we just keep the conversation going and when we disagree, be able to have some type of discourse about it, I think then we can kind of get through. And then I think it becomes really inspiring to look within that way and question ourselves and what we think and what we believe and how we show up. Because the other thing I had to ask myself is, am I changing how I show up out of hate is not the word for me because I don't hate Mike Rinder. I've never hated Mike Rinder. There's been, like I said, the recent videos, I was kind of like, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. And it was frustrating for me, and it is. But he also gets to do that. He gets to, make videos and share his truth like that. So I think that, again, this conversation will be ongoing, and I'm interested in what you guys have to say about it. But I'll tell you this, as is the way on my channel, different opinions and even disagreeing with even me, you can do that. You should do that. You should question what I say. But doing it in a way that's hateful, you're going to get deleted or even blocked. That's not having a conversation. If your intention, if you have curiosity, how did I come to where I stand on this? How did this person come to where they stand on that? You can do that from a place of curiosity and ask questions. But it's really obvious when it's being done purely out of hate or in a hateful way. And that is something that I don't want on my channel and will get you deleted or blocked. But if you want to ask a question, you know what I'm saying? And you all know, I don't need to tell you guys the difference. You know what that is, and you know when you're doing it. So if you genuinely want to know, that's one thing. If you want to just be more hateful about it, that is something different. So I'm gonna try to catch up on the chat a little bit here. I also wanted to say, Joanne, thank you so much for being a member for 1 month. Aloha, Natalie. Aloha, chat. Sharona says, I can't imagine knowing you're leaving this planet and wanting to harm people instead of offering others peace. Mike Rinder won't be the first or the last to do this. It's so sad. And though that's true, and I agree with that, then maybe we shouldn't do the same thing. We're not leaving the planet, God willing, anytime soon. But maybe we shouldn't also harm other people. And I think we know the difference of when we're trying to harm versus when we're trying to discuss and understand and get some type of closure for so many victims of Scientology. There is a big difference, and we all know when we're doing it. I know when I'm doing it. You know when we're doing it. Superstorm Day, Natalie brings the wisdom. I don't honestly feel like that. I think it's, but thank you. Thank you. I hope so. And I'm inspired by what I see. And even in discussions that, whether I agree with it or not, I'm always interested in how people got to that conclusion. How did they get to the point that that is what they believe, even if I disagree with the belief itself? Because that understanding, a lot of times I can see how you got there. I still don't disagree, but now I have understanding of how you got there, which allows me to have compassion for you and what you went through. Because we all went through something different, and we all see the world as we are through our eyes and our experience. And we can argue to the end of time those experiences, and it's going to get us nowhere. But if we can make space for each other as we process and have a willingness to try to just not be so hateful, I think we can have constructive dialogue, and we can really understand so much more. And I think giving understanding too to people who do get very triggered, who are very triggered by Mike Rinder and a lot of what he's said, is allow grace and understanding for that too, because these are individuals who have been through things that nobody should experience. And they did, and they're still here, and they're showing up, and they're continuing to share their stories to expose Scientology. And that deserves compassion and understanding as well. Let's see. It's all retro. Compassion should be given to all, but I want the victims and those who have lost their lives to receive justice. Those videos were a distraction piece. How can his conscience ever truly be clear? From where we sit, or my perspective or your perspective, I would feel the same way, but I'm not in his shoes. We're not. So all we can do is look at it, and we can have judgment about it. We can have an opinion about it. But that's the thing. We're probably not going to get resolution on that, because it's not my experience. It's not your experience. It's his experience. And we all believe what we believe to be true, our own reality. It goes back again to we see the world how we are, not always how it is. And that's how 5 people can see a car accident. You can have 5 different descriptions of what actually happened. And they're all not necessarily wrong. From where they stood at different positions, they will share what they saw. And what they saw, it impacts them based off of where they've been. Maybe they were in a car accident before. Maybe they lost somebody in a car accident. There's all these nuances that come into it. But try to have some grace and understanding from that different point of view. And even for the person who is feeling extreme hate, to try to understand where that comes from. And that's pain. That's pain for that person. And if there's anything we can do to relieve that or bring understanding, I think that, we got to at least try. Tony Hoban, thank you for being a member for 5 months. Wonderful, wise discussion today. Cooler by the Lake says, I agree, but unfortunately there are those who live for the hate and are only there to stir the pot. Not sure anyone can do much to change that. Very true. And here, spoiler alert, we're never going to change that. There will always be that level of a reaction. And one thing we can count on is, let's not forget here, we're talking about a human trafficking cult with billions of dollars who has their own hate branch, the Office of Special Affairs. If you guys aren't already awake, please pay attention or go back and watch on the replay. We're always going to have that because Scientology spends an incredible amount of time doing their best to stir the pot everywhere they possibly can. And they stir the pot through fueling hate and anger and mistrust and all of that. Because if they can get us focused and engulfed in so much hate, it feels nasty and gross and nobody will want to be there. Nobody wants to be a part of that. That's part of their goal. So I'm also asking and want to make sure you all, and I think you do, recognize that you remember that we've also got Scientology operatives trolling and fueling the flames. If somebody's already upset and hurt, they will do things to make them double down on what they're doing if it forwards the aims of Scientology. So I often when I watch a piece of content, I might look and go, hey, what is the intention of this? And that for me is why Mike Rinder's videos rub me the wrong way. I would love to see, and maybe he still will, I would love to hear for him more about what it's been like, his time even in leaving Scientology. I feel like we've not heard enough about that. And I'm hoping maybe somewhere he wrote it down. It's just, I would have a million questions about it. And some maybe he would answer and maybe not. But it might help us understand more too how he got to where he got and why he feels the way he feels or operates the way that he does. I think in leaving Scientology, we see different things happen. Some of us want to be so far away from the way of operating and thinking that we adopt something completely different and don't want to be back in that level of hate and mistrust and all of that. And for some, that's still the only way they know. They only have those tools, but we still need to show compassion and understanding and even love for them because nobody wants to be in that state. Nobody wants to sit in that discomfort and that hate. We all, I think, seek something better. But I think it's fair to look at that the justice we seek may not lead to those feelings and the resolution we think it's going to bring. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I am a believer in leading my own life, in making the decisions that I can best make for me, that I think are best for me. And as part of that, since I left Scientology, I have really worked hard at trying not to show up as a Scientologist or as somebody with that level of hate and mistrust and all of those things. But it's something that I still struggle with. So we're going to get into, there's going to be fighting, there's going to be disagreements, but it doesn't mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Find the creators that you like to follow in this community when it comes to exposing Scientology or whatever that might be. You might enjoy something else and you get to do that. But know that I know here on my channel, my whole goal in coming onto YouTube was to continue to do what I can to expose Scientology as the human trafficking cult that they are, and to use my story and my experience to help people understand how 3 generations of a family can be wrapped up in an abusive organization like that, how we got there, how we got out, how we find healing beyond, what our life is like after a cult. When I do an interview, it's the same thing. I want to bring understanding to how that person got there. And I would like to do more interviews, if people are willing, with people that don't agree with me, that don't see it the same way, but who are willing to have a conversation about it, so that we might maybe bring more understanding to how they got there, and at least be okay with, like, hey, can we at least, like I said, put the pitchforks down? We can disagree. You can even call things out. But it's all in the delivery. It's all how we do it. R.M. Blake says, true compassion is never wrong. And at the end of the day, that's where I landed on this. I don't know all the answers. I don't know what the right thing is necessarily to do or say overall in this situation, but I do know true compassion is never wrong. It's never right. Love is a stronger emotion than hate and anger and fear. And it's not wrong to give into that no matter what. It is not wrong to have compassion and understanding for somebody suffering, regardless of what they did in their past. Regardless. Let's see. Nolene says, I love Mike Rinder. I actually cried when I heard he was ill, but I cannot understand how a man nearing the end used the time to even scores with victims of a cult that he had a hand in controlling. Yeah, that is the big question, and that is still a question for me. And we may not ever understand that. And my hope is that maybe even Mike himself could shed some light on that. I don't know if he will or won't, but that is a good and valid question, and something that I think maybe we can find understanding in other tools. Maybe it's somebody in the mental health field who can help explain this to us more, or give us some type of insight. Mock says it's sad that Rinder chooses to go out like that, but he's a scared person in cognitive decline, so he's not going to change as easily because he's trapped in his brain. Yeah, that could be true too. It's none of us can really know what he's going through, because we're not him. We haven't walked every step on the path that he's gone down. Baby girl says, I don't hate Mike Rinder. I was totally done when he called people flying monkeys. That bit of name calling just stung my heart. I would never call him out because I don't hate him or anyone. I pray for him. Thank you. And I think that's a great point of view too. I don't like that he said this. I don't agree with it that he said this, but I'm still going to wish him well, and I'm going to wish him peace, and I'm going to hope there's peace for his family. I think that if we land nowhere else but there, if someone can't go further than that is like, okay, I think that we can see that. Napoleon says, I have empathy for everyone dying this way. I will vastly disagree with his stance. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. And I think that is the thing that we got to really open up to. You can disagree and still have compassion and understanding. You can disagree with the actions of an individual and still want them to have peace, especially at the end of their life. You can. You can disagree with what he said and still want to connect with him and have some resolution with him before he passes, if you feel drawn and called to do that. Because I don't think compassion is ever wrong. It doesn't change what your disagreement might be. But should the disagreement be the primary thing? Should that be the focus? And I think that's kind of the question here that we're all asking ourselves. Lori Plays. Hey, Lori Plays. Says, it seems to me his intention was to burn everyone who took up for Aaron against him one last time. I would agree with that. That does seem, my perspective, my point of view, I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought too. But again, if it's something that brought him peace, as much as I disagreed with much of what he said in that video and pulling so many people into it, I thought that was kind of petty. But if it brought him some type of peace and closure, okay. Honestly, I hope it did. I hope that was worth it, that it did. And if it did bring some peace and some closure, then okay. You got your peace and your closure. I hope it brings more peace as you move on. Not what I would have done, not what many of you are saying you would have done, but okay. Yadira says, I always write and erase, never send. Good therapy. Yadira, that's really wise. And maybe that's, maybe for some too, journaling, writing it out, processing it. Make a video about it and don't post it. Like whatever that is. In the way that, going back to Liz Gale's video, she's processing in real time. She's trying to understand. She's not sure where she stands. She's asking herself questions that I think are really valid and important. And that honestly, I wish more of us would ask ourselves in those ways. Nolene says, I think Mike proved he is still a believer. He expects to pick up this grudge in his next life, not acting like a man about to meet his maker. And he's not gone yet. So maybe there's still some of that available. The other thing in Mike Rinder doing his videos is he's gotten a lot of support. And I'm not going to begrudge him that because he needs all the support and prayers he can get. So does his family. And again, Mike Rinder did do a lot to expose Scientology. That should be acknowledged. That should be celebrated. It doesn't go away because of the other things that he's done that many of us disagree with. It doesn't go away. It's an interesting exercise to try to hold multiple truths in your head at the same time, even when they might seem like they conflict. But I think that's the lie. That's the lie we were told in Scientology, that it's black and white, that you're with us or you're against us, or you have to choose sides. You don't. You don't. And if someone thinks that I have to choose sides or you have to choose sides, that is their opinion and they can think that all they want. It's not about that for me. It's not. Napoleon says, Aaron, with all his personal flaws, doesn't seem to be vindictive. I always followed both sides because the Rinder side simply had deeper insight as they were high-ranking members. Yeah, there's a lot of great information there in those videos. And even in his blog. Nikki says, you're helping people understand far more than just the cult experience. You're exploring concepts that are much bigger. The Scientology is beneficial to all. Thank you for finding a way to do both. Thank you. I'm hoping it comes across that way. It's an interesting path to walk because, I'm trying not to judge anybody about their reaction or how they show up. I think everybody just needs a bit of understanding and a bit of love. And I think that we can do that. Nikki, thank you for the super chat. An alternative view, a friend recently passed who had been smeared online for advocacy. There was no chance for her to tell her side, whether biased or accepted. She still deserved a chance. Mike wanted to hope all heal to all. Yeah, I get that. That's very true. That is very true. Very true. And I get it, Mary. The flying monkeys remark annoyed me too. Yeah, definitely. But again, it's like, does it do us any good either holding on to that? I think we can have an understanding and know where somebody stands and know that we disagree with them, but be willing to let go of any type of hate or a desire to put our hands on their neck. I once read this book, The Shack. Did you guys read The Shack? You may have, you may not have. It was made into a movie. I didn't see the movie. I read the book. And in the book, it gives a definition of forgiveness. And that definition is that you are simply removing your hand from the person's neck. Remove your hand from their neck. Does it mean they didn't do what they did, that you have the disagreement or problem with? No. But you're not the one trying to be jury, judge, and executioner here. You're just removing your hand from their neck. Doesn't mean that you don't still disagree or what they did wasn't hurtful. I think when we talk about moving beyond or moving further ahead or moving the needle forward, that's kind of a way of thinking that I think would serve us all well. If we can just remove our hands from that person's neck, why do any of us think that we should do that or get to do that? It's a very Scientology way of thinking because Scientology's rule is never defend, always attack. Never defend, always attack. Attack, 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 attack. Scientology doesn't defend themselves. They just attack people and discredit them. I don't want to fall into that same way of being. I left Scientology because I don't agree with that type of behavior. But not always easy to do. I will say that. I struggle with it, and I really do try. Let's see here. Hold on, I'm playing catch up, you guys. Amber says, Natalie, he should really talk with you because you know what's going on in his universe because of my Tony. I'm familiar, going through my own experience, but my Tony and Mike Rinder are very different people with different backgrounds. And I mean, honestly, I would have that conversation. I don't know if it would be helpful or not for him. And again, just because I want to have a conversation doesn't mean he needs to have it or that he wants to have it either. But I think that's a good point that you make there. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm really behind on the chat. I just want to make sure I don't miss any questions there. Mock says, one way I like to answer to people choosing to be nasty is I hope you feel better now because obviously something hurts in them enough to hurt others too. And I'm lucky enough to not have that problem. That's true. There's that whole hurt people. Linda Lou, great point. Need to learn how to parallel play like toddlers. Exactly. Somebody can do something on their channel and it's like you can expose Scientology without tearing other people down. Or you can expose Scientology without tearing down people who are exposing Scientology. This just seems like a concept that is not fully, I think, grasped, or it's not the viewpoint of everybody. And maybe it doesn't need to be, but it is my point of view. I think there's a difference between exposing Scientology and even calling out people who are involved in certain things without, making it so hateful. I go back to it's all in the delivery. KS says, your compassion and empathy is what caused you to question cult of Scientology and you got out. Others are still missing out on that compassion. That is part of it. And I think for me, that's kind of a sticking point for me is I don't want to show up in life or show up and do a live stream dictated by the behavior of somebody else. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be me and I'm going through a lot still, but I'm happy. I find genuine joy in life, and that is where I like to put my focus because I spent 35 years in a human trafficking cult. And even though I show up every day and continue to talk about and expose Scientology, I do that as part of my healing process. And I do it because so many came before me and did it, and it helped me. That is one of the major driving factors of me being here. Other people before me shared their stories, shared the stories of other people, and exposed Scientology so that I had the balls to leave when I did. And not only that, I had the guts to take my family with me. That took 2 years. It took 2 years. It was a lot. It was a lot. Marilyn, Coffee Cults and Crafts says, I supposedly am one of the flying monkeys, but I don't feel any hate or anger. I use humor to process. I agree, Marilyn. And I think that's a great way to do it too, is we can use humor to process sometimes. I totally get that. Bella notes, hey Nat, you help teach life lessons both in Scientology and out. You have an incredible ability to relate and have integrity in your content. Thank you. And thank you guys all for being here and having this conversation. I think we're going to continue doing it as I think this community as a whole processes. And remember too, right, when we talk about our community, that means different things to different people. There are people who have taken up this fight to expose Scientology that I don't consider to be part of my community, mainly because they have taken a route of wanting to tear down people who are exposing Scientology. They're also exposing Scientology. And the difference is, never say never, but you're not likely to see me saying, oh, you're doing it wrong. You should be doing it like this, or you should be focusing on this. No, there's so many things to focus on. I mean, it is dealer's choice when it comes to ways to expose Scientology. And we each have a connection to different parts of that. Some people connect more with the harmful practice of disconnection, like Phil and Willie Jones, losing their kids to the Sea Organization because of that. And then there's Child SA. Literally Serge, Miriam, others connect with that because that was their experience, which makes them amazing advocates for that. And so on and so on and so on. There's just so many different ways of doing it. Hey, there's Mark Bunker. Nice to see that kindness is under discussion. Yep. And thank you for sharing what you shared yesterday, Mark. Maramalo, I love your heart, Natalie. Scientology couldn't program out your humanity completely. No, they tried for a very long time. I thought I didn't have it. I thought I didn't have empathy or compassion because it was never really modeled for me. And when it finally was, I went, oh, I recognize that. I know what that is. I'm very capable of that. I was just never allowed to be that way in Scientology. And because I was never allowed to be that way in Scientology, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to that. I just don't think we need to hate just for the heck of it. There's a better way. Becky says, I want my son to feel the same pride I felt when people spoke of my dad during his life and after he passed. I try to do my best, not always successful, but I keep trying. I agree. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to mess things up. We're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to offend someone. You can't be here on YouTube and reach as many people as we do. I'm just about to hit 5 million cumulative views since I've been here on YouTube. Almost a year now, and I think it was in early mid-December. That's a lot of opportunity to say the wrong thing in the eyes of different people. We can just do our best and share our experience. We don't have to never defend, always attack. We don't have to do that anymore. BC Natalie, you're such a lover. Everyone can see that. And as bad as you think you were in the cult, I can't imagine you were still just full of love. I appreciate that. I had to suppress it and I got in trouble for it quite a bit, especially my sense of humor. It's called joking and degrading in Scientology, and I am all about it. That reminds me, I need to make some Joker and Degrader merch. I got to work on that. Okay, today is Tuesday. There's going to be a members only live. I wrote myself a post-it to remember to tell you 4 p.m. today. Catch it on the replay if you can't make it. We're going to have a lot to talk about. It's a way for me to connect more with you guys on a smaller, with less people. We can have more conversation. Oh my gosh, my nose is running again. We have a lot of fun doing it, and so you guys are just amazing. You've helped me process my own situation as I work through the loss of my Tony and so many other things. So I really love when we do that. I hope you guys can join. Please, everybody. Oh, I almost forgot. Oh, no, I did already tell you, right, about the premiere. I think it's at 12. My video, it involves cookies. Jenna Miscavige makes a little cameo, and it involves this hot mess, but I'm trying. So... Abraham, yes, you would be a joker and degrader. Absolutely. And power to you for it. I love it. All right, you guys, think about it. We'll talk about it. But most importantly, everybody, get out and have an amazing cult-free day.